Hey, everybody, welcome to Getting Real with Gloria. I'm your host, Gloria, and we're here where my journey supports yours. This episode is a really special one for me because my dog Teddy Bear's angel-versary is tomorrow, 3 years since he passed. And I have an incredible person that I met actually in grief group, Jerri Lee, with me today. And I couldn't have asked for a better person to chat with me about pet loss and sort of what this angel-versary means for me, but then also Jerri's experience of losing two of her dogs and what that was like for her. And we're going to chat a lot about pet loss today and the things that we experienced that were really hard, but then also the things that sort of led us to places of inspiration or hope, or healing throughout the process. And I'm just going to honor Teddy by showing his picture today. So here he is. Here's my boy, 14 and a half years old. And yeah, just like a magical relationship. I think for many of us who have heart dogs, dogs that really touch our souls, there's just nothing like it in the world. There's a special place of trust and safety that comes out of that relationship. I think for many of us, we've not ever experienced with people before. And so, I know for me, the loss was really cataclysmic in that it changed so much. And it's actually the reason I do this channel. It's the reason that I speak out on Instagram and my other channels, why I write. So I'd love to just actually start by introducing Jerri. So Jerri and I met actually in grief group the first month that I was grieving. And Jerri was also fresh in her journey as well. And we just really connected and bonded over our shared love of dogs, obviously. And then also this shared really messy experience. So Jerri, tell me a little bit about sort of like how you ended up at grief group and what that was like for you the first and also the second time.
Sure. So my experiences in losing Coco, and losing Max were different. They were completely different experiences, but equally painful and devastating, as you know. My first reasoning for going to grief group was when in losing Coco, I was so lost. I had never gone through that before. We had been fighting her cancer for 2 years. I didn't know what life would look like without her in it. And my little pack of the three of us was sort of blown up. I had also just lost a father figure a few weeks before that. My relationship ended a couple days before that. Um, and I just didn't know what to do with what I was feeling. And thankfully, one of my sisters who ran this grief group, she's a veterinarian, Susan Holt, and she suggested it. She gave me a disclaimer, it's not for everybody. She explained what it was. And it was a couple days after I had lost Coco, I joined. And I just remember a feeling of not being able to breathe,
Mm,
not just not being, I didn't know what, I mean, it was like this deep guttural pain that I was feeling
mm,
and not knowing how to move forward without being able to hold her and that routine
yeah,
that I was used to
yeah,
doing with her. And
yeah,
oh, just all the little things. I mean, she
yeah.
was 16.
Mhm.
She was my everything. In the three of us, it was the three of us, like with everything. And um, that's what led me there with Coco. And then I had 2 years with Max where a lot of my grief was directed at taking care of him.
Mm,
So I lost him at 17 a few months back. And my journey with him after losing Coco was he was my priority, learning everything that I could about senior dogs and giving my goal was ultimately I want him to have the best day of his life every day
mhm,
because I don't know how much longer I have with him. And we built an entirely new relationship that was beautiful. And it was me and him instead of the three of us. And
mhm.
we took care of each other. And he just, it's still really hard to talk about this. Wow. Um, and in losing him, my grief was so painful because it felt like the book ended, not just a chapter. I didn't know how to live my life without the two of them at this
Mhm.
point. But there was a lot of gratefulness in I knew that I had done everything with him. I didn't feel like I
Mhm.
had lost time with him. Whereas with Coco, I felt like I failed. I didn't do the right things. There could have been more I did. And with Max, I did every single possible thing. He had the best last couple years. And I was so grateful to be able to give him that gift of letting him go when he was ready and not letting him suffer in any way. And there was so much gratefulness in that. Okay, they're together now. At least they have each other. And that was peaceful and calming to me to know that. So my journey after losing both of them was very different, but my gratefulness for them to be able to be together and understanding my grief was a little I don't want to say easier, but I kind of knew what steps I wanted to take. And this transformation in me started in losing Coco, and I knew I could feel it. I knew that I was changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's like this compartmentalization that happens because I'm putting all my focus on, Max now. And in losing him, it was like this transformation was like jolted forward. And I'm a very different person now. My relationships are very different. In losing Max, I was estranged from my family at this point in time. So I didn't have that support from them. So it was very lonely and very hard to articulate my grief. A couple of my best friends were very supportive, but I don't think a lot of people that aren't super animal people can relate to that depth of pain, and it's confusing and hard, and that there's comparisons being made about it's not like this happened, and so you tend to internalize a lot of that. And for me, again, I was able to leverage and go through grief group, and talking with you really helped me. Just people that aren't comparing your grief to other things or wanting you to be okay so badly they almost push you into that.
Yeah.
So the grief group was a great outlet for that. And it also became a place where I felt like I could help other people when they would come in that place that I recognized so much of despair. It was such a helpful piece of my journey to be able to go through and share with people who I could cry, and I didn't feel like I had to hide it, or I didn't feel like I had to be okay and be strong and be resilient because that's what's expected of me. I could just feel what I was feeling.
Yeah. You've said so many things in my mind. I'm trying to compartmentalize now, like, okay, I want to address this. Thank you, first of all, for just being so open and honest about, the pain that is pet loss for so many of us. And I want to start sort of right at the beginning, which is about, we talked about those first moments being this guttural pain. I could really relate to that because for me, it was the same thing. Like, it was this weird full body pain. It was like more than just emotional pain. I'd been through breakups and, other people losses. I'd also just lost my grandmother not long before Teddy passed. And it just wasn't the same. It was such a different type of pain. I think you're right. When you have people who can support you in that specific type of loss, it really does make a difference. And all loss is loss, regardless of what it is and who it is. And so it's really important just in general that we don't compare losses. But I think that there is something to be said for pet loss because I think it's because of that thing, like you said, you were like, I wasn't sure how I was going to live life. Like, I wasn't sure how I was going to make it through the next day without them because our pets are such, and I'm going to just move to dogs because for me, it's just easier to talk about dogs, but this applies to everyone.
Me too.
Our dogs are there every day. They are like there when we wake up and they're there when we go to bed and they're there through like the hard times and the, the happy times. And it's rare that a person is with us as much as a dog is with us.
Yeah.
So I just feel like it's also a matter of routine and like habitual nature of our brain is accustomed to this being in our world that makes such a big impact on us. And also dogs just don't judge. Like, even if they make, I know Teddy used to make faces at me when I would be in college and come home drunk. And is that like, you could
Oh
do
my gosh.
but they don't judge, they don't judge us in essence, and they also really embrace who we are on the inside and not who we show to the world. Like they truly know who
That's
we are.
Yeah, that's another piece of it for me, which I also count as a blessing now. The two of them had gone through so many experiences and journeys and ups and downs with me.
Hmm.
They were always supportive
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
non-judgmental,
Yeah.
and they went through all of those things with me. And I remember when I let go of Max, it was this wave of I can actually let all of those pains and trials that I went through, that can all be let go now. It's
Mm.
a I have a new life now.
Mm.
And for some reason, that goodbye was a goodbye to that whole life,
Yeah.
um, in a way that they took that pain for me. And it's something I like to be grateful for, I guess.
Yeah. And I definitely felt, maybe not exactly the same, but I definitely felt a shift, referring back to your earlier comment about you transforming. I definitely felt that day that I said goodbye to Teddy. I also had the privilege of being able to have a goodbye where I got to choose the place and time in my backyard and say goodbye the way I wanted to. And I know not everyone gets that privilege, but I do feel grateful for that. And right after that, I could feel this monumental shift. Like my world would never be the same. And I kept saying it to people, and people would say, like, but you're no, you're you. Oh, you're just feeling that right now. Oh, you'll get over that. Oh, like you're everything's still the same. It's just you right now you're in pain. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I know that this is like one of those monumental life moments that you're never going to go backwards. Like there's going to be things now that you make decisions about, or parts of yourself that you now embrace that you didn't before, that's going to rock your whole world and everyone in it. And I had the same experience. I think it's actually one of the, as much as it is a horribly painful process, one of the things, like you said, to be great, that we can be grateful for is that transformation. And so one of the big things that I'm all about is like living my life every day like Teddy saw me. Like I
Yeah.
strive to be the person Teddy saw me as, and the person that I wanted to be who was most like Teddy. And that to me is the way that we honor our pets, and we can create a enriched life out of loss. It
Mhm.
doesn't soak up the pain, and it doesn't sugarcoat the pain. It doesn't use positivity as a band-aid. It just is. We have to keep living. Like, well, we don't have to, but it's, we're given the ability to be here and be human, and this and moving, into a space where we get to have the opportunity to live again
Mhm.
after loss. I feel like is something that we can grab and really use to our benefit. And I feel like our pets would want that too anyway for us.
Yes,
They
yes.
don't want us to be, in a place of sorrow all the time. Um, so yeah, I just feel like those things are things sometimes people don't recognize, and loss, that it is an opportunity for you to be the things that your dog saw in you, to be the person that your dog saw. And I think that that's the best way that we can honor our dogs. I do want to talk a little bit also about, like, let's talk about the transition, sort of moving from those early days into the months into the first year. And like, so for those first few days, it could be from moments after into the first few days. What was the hardest thing for you? And like, what were the things that helped you survive?
I mean, breathing was really hard for me,
Mm.
and being able to be present in a situation and not be in the depth of pain I was in.
Mhm.
And I tried, and I was able to do it in for some moments, but um, a lot of what helped me in losing Coco was caring for Max. A lot of what helped me, once Max was gone, was caring for my rescue, the new rescue that I brought in. But I think, some of the activities that I would do were really being outside, being in nature,
Mhm. Yeah.
and visiting places that they loved or that were our places, which
Mhm.
were several beaches and parks that we would go to. Um, Even just sitting in the backyard where I had to let them both go, that right immediately after, I did that a lot, and
Yeah,
to
me
my
too.
neighbor's detriment.
Yeah, me
But
too. Yeah.
yeah, it just, that spot is very sacred to me, and it can immediately bring up that pain, but in a healing way now.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, it was really being outside, and I didn't have a lot of people I could cry to about it, or that I felt comfortable.
Hmm. Expressing.
Yeah, and it's not their fault. It's no one's fault. It's just, it was a very private, deep pain that no one shared with me. So I didn't want to. I think that probably has a lot to do with the losses I had incurred right before the
Mhm.
lot losing my pets. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a very, it was being outside, being around water. Those were very healing places for me. Exercise is also something to meet for me. Dancing, that was also an outlet for me to get my emotion out in a way that was, I felt healthy.
Mhm.
um, so yeah, those were the things. I think nature is a really big part of it, though, for me.
Yeah.
Just like
I mean,
you.
yeah, I think in general, nature just has a lovely healing quality, and our dogs tend to like nature for a reason. They feel most at home in that space as well. So it is a nice link for us, especially if we spent a lot of times. And I don't know about you, but I definitely spent like hundreds of thousands of hours walking Teddy, around the block or in nature. So it's that kindred sense of
You
bondedness
feel
that keeps, yeah, you feel them exactly. You can retrace the steps, and it is comforting. um there's also a lot to be said for continuing routines that you have done with, and this goes for people or pets, but that you have done with a pet, continuing the routine, being aware that yes, they're not there and there is a pain to that, but making that routine something new. And I know you did that with Kai and the beach, your new dog,
that.
that you brought Kai to the beach a lot to instill that routine with a new dog, which basically allows your brain to learn that, because grieving essentially on a scientific level is just a relearning of our environment. So we have these templates in our brain, and basically we get used to the people and the pets that are in our lives and where those people and pets are in space. And when those pets disappear, our brain actually can't really compute that initially. And that's part of what the pain is. It's like that relearning of what the world is without that being.
Mhm.
And routines tend to activate a lot of that pain because our brain is going, we're doing this routine, and yet this pet isn't here. So by relearning that routine with a new pet or with yourself or with friends or in another way, you're basically telling your brain, hey, yes, we're doing this thing, but now we're doing it a little differently, and your brain actually catches on a little faster. So I love that you kept that routine. um,
Yeah, right after losing Coco, there was a particular beach we would always go to. And right after losing her, I couldn't. So
mhm.
I found a new beach.
Yep.
And then Max and I went to that beach every day for 2 years, no matter the weather. We went there, we did PT, we did all the things. And then I would only go back to the original place that I would bring them both to on occasions
Mhm.
for a reason. Um, and then, my last morning with Max, we were sitting on our new beach, and I was, I knew, it's really hard to talk about that day, but um, we went to that beach, and then later that afternoon, I had Kai at this point, and I did not want to not have that be part of my life anymore. So I brought Kai there, just me and him, and that was one of the hardest things to do,
Yeah.
to continue that. But now we go all the time. We continue the routine, and we also go to the original beach pretty often. Like, I'll be going there after this.
Oh,
Um,
great.
and it's very, I don't know how to explain it. The pain is very therapeutic to
Mm,
feel. Uh,
mm,
but it's also because I'm so happy for the memories that I have there. And
mhm.
I am really grateful that I get to have those memories. Um, so, it's still, I think it's still all a little raw at times. And I think with losing Coco, I didn't, because I put everything into focusing on Max, I probably compartmentalized a lot of my emotions there that I didn't realize
Mhm.
until I lost Max. And then it became bigger.
Yeah.
And so I'm still working through all of that.
And that's very common to do, when we're caring for another pet. And I had similar situation with Teddy Bear. I had adopted Coors, our Australian cattle dog, you know, just a couple months before Teddy passed, not knowing that he was going to pass. But, in those early days, for me, the pain was, similar in that you're moving around, but it's like for me, it was like I wasn't there. But I was
Yeah.
moving around, but it was like I was not there at all. Um, and it was a very surreal feeling to be in my life and to feel very much like a stranger in my world. Like everything, like pictures on the walls and stuff. I was like, I don't know who that is. I don't know what life this is. Like I just really,
Gosh,
I really struggle with that.
I do. I look at pictures of myself with them, and I'm like, I'll never smile like that again. And it's not true. But it's a different, you feel different. You feel like a joy with extra learning,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
experience. Like it is a different chapter. The book did not end. It felt
No,
like,
it did not
but
end.
it did
But
not.
there's a naivety before loss that you don't get back once you've experienced that. For both
Right.
people, the first time for people, or like, and someone you really care about as a person, but then also for pets. Like the first time you lose, especially if you lose a heart dog, you never get the naivety back of that experience, and nothing will prepare you for that experience. So like you can, Teddy beat cancer 3 times. I Wonder dog. I don't know how. So we had 3 different times, and then we had a bout of pneumonia that almost killed him. So we had 4 different times basically where it was like, this is the end, from the time he was 9 or 10 until the time he was 14 and a half. And nothing could prepare me. Like as much as during those times, I would say like, okay, imagine this is it. It could be it. Like,
Oh,
what's
I
this gonna look
know.
like? But nothing could prepare you for that.
Right.
No matter how many tears you cry in the shower, before he went to surgery, like nothing could prepare you. So
True.
um, I feel like there is a naivety that we don't get back. And I think that's what you're seeing in yourself, like that certain smile. It's like, it's not necessarily you'll never find joy again. For me, actually, in some ways, or at least in my experience, because I did a lot of trauma work after grief or after Teddy passed, I feel like now when I smile, I mean it. And a lot of times when I smiled back then, I didn't mean it, not the way I do now. And it's actually a shame to me that, yeah, it's a shame to me that Teddy actually doesn't get, I don't get to take pictures of Teddy and have that same brilliance. But I do think that there's a naivety, there's an innocence there in love that I won't ever get back.
So that's all so true. I love the way that you said that. When I'm talking to Kai, I say those things like, I hope, I'm sorry that I didn't get to give this life to Max and Coco the
Yeah.
way that I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
But it was a great life they had, just a little different.
We become better pet parents as we
Oh,
parent. Like, I mean, it's the same thing with real parents, right? Like the first child, they're like, oh, I'm gonna do it all wrong. And then the second child, they're like, the little hang our hands off. But I mean, I think with pet parents, we actually go the reverse. And like the first time we might be a little more hands off. The second time we're like, we're gonna get this right.
yeah.
It's so I think that we get better, and it's the foundation of the original love. I think that everything builds on.
Mhm.
So like for me, I look at it, I'm like, all right, yeah, I made some mistakes like with Teddy for sure. And like there were definitely things I did that I wish I had done differently. And but at the same time, like I know that I gave of myself. And it was one of the things that when he was very young, I was like, I will give of myself to this dog until like I have nothing left. And
Mhm. You did.
I did. So I have no regrets about that. And I think that that is something that I feel grateful for. And I do the same
Yeah.
thing for Course when he's barking to want to go like to the hike and I'm exhausted after work. I'm like, I don't want to go. I tell myself that, like, hey, do you want to look back and be like, I could have had one more hike, or do you want to just do this hike? Because he's here now and you're here now, and like just do it. So I do push myself for that. I think it's something that definitely drives me.
I can't remember if we talked about this before or not, but there was this quote that I had seen that was like, you know, your whole life is filled with so many things, but for your
Oh
dog,
God,
you are
you are their world.
their whole
Yes.
life.
Yes.
That quote is like
I
so
know.
ingrained to me that anything this dog wants, he
Yes.
gets, within reason, obviously, but I will go
Of
on the
course.
hike. Like you said,
Of
I
course.
will make the food. I will do whatever it is because I want him to have the best life because he
Yep.
makes my life so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that in those first, especially like the first few days, it is a lot of processing, and a lot of processing happens both unconsciously, which is why actually a lot of us don't sleep in those early days, because you are doing so much processing at night. And also your body does receive a shift in cortisol, and so you do have more stress hormones in your system, so you're basically like running on caffeine, which is why I recommend to anyone who is in those early phases, don't drink caffeine if you don't have to, because it really, you already have so much of that in your system, and so it keeps you wired. And you also have a lot of that brain fog, which I know I experienced, especially in those, even the first couple of months, I really had a lot of brain fog. And that's again, that learning is happening. You're using a lot of energy for that, which is why nutrition is really important. And then, obviously, if you can sleep, do, or even just take naps or whatever. But I know for me, like the first few weeks, it was like just making sense of like how this was going to go, like you said, like how this was going to go. And then also like, how could this have happened? Even though like I had all the details of why it happened, and no one lives forever, but it was still this, just coming to terms with like the fact that it had happened and that he wasn't coming back, and, just grappling with that, because your
How
brain
do you
holds
keep
so much.
them? Right. Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to
No, no,
speak.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just how do you keep them? And I had the pleasure of getting to read your book already. So um and you talked about this in the book. How do you get to keep them with you? How can you
Yeah.
experience them still after losing them? And once you're able to accept and move to that place of how to keep them a part of your life, and
Yeah.
you're not terrified of losing their smell, and you're not all
Yeah.
those fears of losing from like things,
Mm.
you can start really embracing the signs that are everywhere, but you have to be open to them. And
Yeah.
you know I hear people struggling a lot with, I didn't have a dream, I didn't they're not coming back to say goodbye, like they're looking for these signs and they're not finding them. And um it's really just accepting the signs that they're sending and being open to it,
Yeah.
that you do see them. I see them all the time, and
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point that you bring up, in that it's like, how do we keep them close? And I think that that first year angel-versary is one of those moments where we get the opportunity to like decide how do we want to do this? How do we want to honor this first year? How do we want to honor our growth in this first year? The fact that we just got through it. How do we want to, like you said, like keep them alive in us, like in our hearts? And I think that for me, that's like every angel-versary, that's like what I'm sort of working towards is this year, what is it that I'm going to do that's going to honor Teddy?
Mhm.
Or this year, what is it that I'm going to do that's going to, congratulate my growth of making it through another year, in this weird altered state of reality for me. Cause I think that's what like we realize, we're like, we're in a weird alternate universe where our pet does not exist. And like, we've got to
Yeah.
somehow make this work and make it fun, I guess, because we're here. But I love that there's so many ways to do that. And nature is definitely one. I know like you continue to go to the beach on the anniversaries, is that right? You still do that?
Yeah, the first one, honestly, the anticipation of these big dates
Mm-hmm.
is always much harder for me.
It's true. Yeah.
Leading up to it, I'm very, right now, Max's first anniversary will be coming up in months, and I'm already reliving my last months with him, and feeling a lot of that. And so it's the anticipation is always really hard for me. But with Coco, we're coming up on 3 years, which I can't believe, similar to Teddy. And
Yeah.
I with her, I've kept it very simple, and the actual days are actually really nice, and they're really peaceful and happy, and I feel good on those days because it's like walk down memory lane of this amazing journey I had with her and Max. And I'm hoping for that with Max. I haven't decided what I will do, but I'm feeling it already. And
Yeah.
it's months away. I'm still feeling it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely this year felt a restlessness that happened like in February, March for me, even though like I wasn't necessarily dreading it. I wasn't necessarily feeling a whole lot of pain, but there was just like a restlessness in me. And that's when I start to notice like, okay, what's coming up. And a lot of times it is Teddy stuff. Like, okay, you just, you're feeling like you need more time. The pictures, the holding on to stuff. So when he first passed, one of the first things I did was like print out every picture that I could get my hands on. And like, I'm not even kidding. I must have printed 300
I
something.
did the same thing. I have, they're everywhere. Like
And it
it's,
was like I compiled them in these boxes, and one night I sat down and organized them till 3 in the morning, and like by date and all this stuff. And some of the photos weren't even good. They were like he didn't
yeah.
look that great. They were blurry. They were like the photo had cut off half the side of like it was like some of them like really, but
But
I was
you remember
so
taking that picture or doing that
it
moment,
was
that you remember the
yeah.
moment.
It was that, but it was also like I was desperate to hold on to anything that was tangible. And that was tangible. And I was like, I can't lose these memories. Or if I print them all out and I hold them in my hands, I won't lose them. And this year, one of the things that I did was I went through all the pictures and threw out ones that I was like, either he doesn't look good, so I don't look at this picture and go, oh, Teddy. Or they were like blurry, and I'm like, why did I print this? Or like
Yeah.
he's in the far background, but it's actually of somebody else. But I was like, but he's in there.
You know,
So like, but it felt so good. Like I must have thrown out like 100 pictures. But then I had all these ones that really did mean something to me. And that to me is also like I see that and I go, oh, that's your shift right there that's happening. Like this is your shift in mindset and perspective and where you are and confidence and
it
just
feels good to notice
it does. It does. Yeah,
because it's a gift from them. And
it
it's like,
is.
I'm
It is. It is.
evolving and growing and being a better person
Yes.
because of what I've learned from them.
Yes. And I think that's something a lot of people, especially those who haven't gone through loss just yet, you're anticipating it, or you just have gone through it. Like there will come a time where you are able to look backward, but you have to get far enough along for there to be a backward. So, like, for you to turn around and go, oh, that was me. But it takes a while to get to that place. But when you do, it really is amazing to see the shifts. And I love the signs thing that you talked about. Like, a lot of people feel like you said, like, they should be having dreams, they should be having this and that. There's not one way to stay connected to your dog or your pet that you've lost. Like there's not one way to do it. And there if someone's saying to you, well, if you didn't see this sign or do this thing, that means they haven't come yet. BS. And like I've spent a lot of time in the metaphysical world, and I've spent a lot of time in the religious world, and I've spent a lot of time in these places that have a lot of meaning for life after death. And I can tell you also, just from a scientific aspect, because I love marrying these things, when you like your brain has all of these neural connections from memory. So like the time you heard their nails across the floor to go eat at the food bowl, or when they came up the driveway and you remembered the smell of the flowers when they were doing that, like your brain codes that and remembers it. And it will actually, when you're going through loss, like will begin to play those like movies to you.
Yes.
Sometimes that's like a beautiful thing and sometimes it hurts. It just depends on where you are. But also, don't take that as like, if you're not having that, it means there's something wrong with you. It might be that your brain's just not doing that, and that's okay. There's also this idea of like rumination, which is when we become like really focused on the anticipation and like feeling that sense of like, oh my God, I'm thinking about this now. And part of that is also part of the learning in that the rumination is actually it's sort of a catch 22 because it's a way for the brain to actually go through something over and over in a loop to try to learn something. It's like looking for where are my clues so I can learn something out of this. But unfortunately, sometimes there's not something to learn. It's just like this just happened and there's not anything to learn. So it's good to like balance like you do back and forth with like I'm thinking about it and then I leave it alone and I just do something else and I transition my attention to Kai or to something else and then I come back to it because that's sort of like again one of the things that the brain does as adaptation. We're meant to adapt. It's like one of the reasons why we have a brain. Or I should say, one of the things our brain does for us is adaptation. And adaptation is never more powerful than in grief and in loss, which is one of the reasons I love studying it. But um, sometimes like the signs and the visuals of like what you see or what you think you see, like, oh, the animal's coming toward me. Like, yes, it could be that it is a spirit of your animal coming toward you. It could also be your brain producing that. If you don't
Yeah.
see it, it doesn't mean that their animal's not with you. I think it's more of like, do you feel them in your soul? Like, because the truth is that the bond, the attachment, once that's formed, like that does not disappear. So neurologically, your pet is alive inside your brain. It will always be alive inside your brain. Like that's unless, heaven forbid you get like some strange brain amnesia, but like otherwise it's alive inside your brain. So
Yeah.
you do not have to worry about getting some sort of outside sign to tell you that your pet is still alive inside of you, I guess
I
it's like.
think the signs are really, I feel like them making a connection with you. Like when I drive down the street, I will see a cloud and I will make it into one of those dogs or both of those dogs all constantly. And I'll usually try to take pictures of it. And then when I'm like looking back in my camera roll and I see those pictures, I'm like, what the heck how did I think that was them? But it was in that moment. It was
Yeah.
so much them
Yeah.
that I had to take a picture of it.
Yeah.
But then it's really for me when any sign happens, it's if I hear the tip taps on the ground and I know Kai's in the bed with me and I'm like, what? When those things happen, I feel like it's really just them trying to make a connection. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily the thing.
Yeah.
It's just a connection that's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. And I think that I feel the same way about like when I see like a lot of times I'll see butterflies on our hike and they'll like
Mhm.
come right up to me and I'm like, oh, hi Teddy, even though Teddy was like the farthest thing from a butterfly as possible. But in those early days, like there was a chipmunk that like came up and stared at me for a long time, and I was just like, Teddy. But I think you're right. I think a lot of it also is like how we want to interpret that sign too, and like if we want that, like if we feel that that is truly our pet speaking to us, then like that's our pet speaking to us. Like no one has to tell us it's another thing. So I guess for anybody who might be wondering about signs, like if you want there to be a sign and you're open to the signs and you feel that that is your pet speaking to you, then that is what it is. And you don't need anyone to tell you otherwise. And if you're not having any sort of experience and you feel like you should be, then you don't need to be either. Like
Or
you
even
don't
just look
have to be
around. It's probably there and you're
right.
not
Right.
recognizing it because you're looking for something specific.
Yes,
Um,
that too. If you're looking for a specific way, like I looked in the beginning, like I wanted a visual image of Teddy. I wanted Teddy walking toward me and I wanted to visually see him, not just like a mental projection of like I can see this in my sort of third eye, like in my mental brain, but like I wanted to actually be like, no doubt that was him. Oh my God, does everyone see this? And I never
exactly.
got that. Like I just didn't. And I realize now that like obviously sometimes we want that because we want to feel like it's more alive. We want to feel like that's more alive.
You want tangible.
Yeah, more tangible.
Anything tangible.
Yeah, well now when I see like a piece of scrap food on the sidewalk, I'm like, oh, it's Teddy. And that to me feels like just as powerful because,
Yep.
that was something he would have loved and like something that he, would have appreciated. So yeah, I think signs can be a way for us to stay in touch. I also think that there's however we want to believe the afterlife or if there is one or like how does this work, where do the pets go, I think that's also like should be personal preference, like however you want to perceive that is truth, like don't let
Yeah.
anybody tell you otherwise because I think that also helps. There actually is scientific evidence that does help the brain to kind of compute like when you create like okay, this is my belief system for how I think about life after death, your brain now has like just more structure for like oh well okay this is where the pet went then, and it does create more healing, it does create a better sense of calm and peace. And so there's reasons why it's said that like people who have like potentially strong life after death beliefs oftentimes will have like lower anxiety levels when things like loss happen because they feel more confident in that. So if you don't like sharing, like how do you feel, Coco and Max, like how do you feel that they are now? Like where are they and like what's your belief about that?
I like to just picture them running together and playing the way they used to. Um, I believe that they're with me and they're around me, and that this is probably not common at all, but the rescue that I have is such a hybrid of both of their personalities. Didn't expect that. It wasn't, I did when I took this rescue, someone had asked me and I thought I had too much on my plate. There's a reason for everything, obviously, because I
Yep.
lost Max a few months later, but he came into my home knowing his job was to support Max.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did lose when we did lose Max, he knew his job was me and I knew my job was him. And he is so bossy and not demanding, but just boss. He's bossy little guy, just like Coco was, just like her. And then he's super affectionate and loving and has a lot of the same characteristics of affection that Max had. And it blows my mind every day because it feels like it makes me feel like they're inside me and they're with me. And I don't think that's an experience that happens often. I am shocked that I'm living it, but having another animal, which I did not want or think that I was ready for.
I remember.
Yeah, I was very scared and I did not want anything to divert my attention from what I had chosen to be my number one priority, in life. And it really, I think I forgot what the question was.
Oh, that's fine. It was just about like what your beliefs were, like life after death, or like how do you see the dogs sort of moving spiritually now that they're not here physically, like sort of how that
I
works.
feel them through Kai. I really do feel them through being able to care for Kai in a way that is even better than I was before. And I think I was pretty great dog mom
I bet you
to
were.
begin with, but I feel even more qualified to be Kai's mom. And I love taking care of him. But I feel them inside of me in like you were saying before, in the choices I make and the way that I treat people and the way that I say no now, the way that I stand up for myself and set boundaries now where people pleasing is not me anymore.
Isn't
I'm
that
very,
amazing? Like pet
it's
loss can give you a sense of
fun.
fearlessness. Like,
Yeah.
isn't it amazing? Like, I just find that
Confidence.
to be an interesting side effect that I was not expecting. I think when you
I
lose
know.
so much, it feels like you've got nothing left to lose. So why not? It just gives you a feeling of like brazen boldness that you didn't
That's
have
exactly
before.
it. There's nothing that will hurt that way.
No. Yeah.
And I do have that sense of confidence and I have nothing left to lose like that. And it also led me to really learning how much I loved caring for senior dogs. And I want that to be, that is a purpose of mine, to be able to take care of older dogs, maybe in their last chapter, or foster. I'm not ready to adopt more yet, but fostering, yes. And it takes a while, I think, to get to that place, but it's like a gift I can give back to them for other little guys that need love.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something, like you said, like another way you honor is, by giving back of your love to Kai. And that's like how you honor the other two dogs, and you're continuing to keep building on that foundation that you had from them. And, I do the same with Coors and
Totally do.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
love
So
watching it.
yeah, and it was the same thing. Like we couldn't go back to agility initially when Teddy passed because it was just like too hard. Teddy was always our biggest cheerleading fan, and he would like when I taught Core's agility in our living room, he would always get like Teddy would get the participation prize, and so I couldn't do that. But now like one of the things that we do is like we compete, and that's this summer we're going for our I don't know second title or something. So so that's one of the ways we're going to honor Teddy this year too, is by doing that. So yeah, I think there's just so many ways that we can do that and keep them alive, like you said, and
That's the easy
deciding.
part.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It's easy because you want them in your mind and in your
yeah,
journey. And
yes,
so thinking of them is like just such a joy for me. It's missing them is hard, but
yeah, yeah,
healing them is not, once you get,
yeah.
through the stages.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a great point of like there's a difference between missing them and thinking of them. Like thinking of them doesn't always have to equal missing them. It does sometimes, but like it doesn't always have to. And I think as you do move through your seasons of grief, you do become more comfortable with the absence. You don't necessarily like it, but you just become more comfortable. You're more adapted to it, I guess. And you end up feeling a sense of like the yearning gets a little less intense. Like in the beginning, the yearning is so strong. I think that's one of the things that does make it really hard to function and just breathe and do all those things. I think the yearning becomes less intense, not necessarily disappears. I don't know for me if it'll ever disappear. Like I think I'll always want him here, but I think you just become accustomed to the change, and you become aware that without this loss, I couldn't have had other changes in my life. Like I know I
That's
couldn't
what
love
growth is.
Coors. I couldn't love Coors the way I do if Teddy were still here. I just couldn't. Like I had to go through that loss to love in the way that I do.
Yeah, and that's where the growth comes, and
Yeah,
that feels good
it
to know
does.
that you're
It does.
growing and evolving and becoming a better you. And not that the previous you or me
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
were
Yeah.
awesome. It's just you're being better, a better you for you and for those
Yeah.
around you that love you and
Yeah.
that you love, people and animals. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of those losses, you take them with you, and they affect you and change you in different ways.
They do. They become a part of your true self, and then that only helps you shine brighter. So
I think so. I like to think of it that way. There's so many gifts in the journey with them, and then the chapter.
after.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to even say, but it's true.
Well, it was such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for opening up and sharing about your experience. And I know this episode is specially dedicated to Teddy Bear, Max, and Coco, who always live in our hearts. And um, check back here for more details. I'll put in the chat the name of our grief group counselor who you can still do grief group with, and also Jerri Lee's Instagram in case you want to follow her. And thanks so much, Jerri, for being here.
Thank you. I love talking with you, and I will talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.